All right, all praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High Elohim of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I want to say peace to each and every one of you in the name of His Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, who we know as Jesus the Christ. So it's a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to bring a message contained in His Word, and never count it as a thing to do so. In today's message, I want to deal with the judgment of the Lord, and it is often described as a cup in which once that cup reaches its brim, then judgment is poured out upon the nations. And that is something we should really consider uh, when we look at the nation in which we live. There are universal principle as you reap what you sow, and at a certain point, every nation is judged for its iniquity. And so we'll see examples of this in the biblical text, and we'll also see what's going to happen in the future. Let's pick it up at Genesis the 15th chapter. Genesis the 15th chapter, and we'll pick it up at verse 12. Genesis 15 and verse 12. Because in Genesis 15 and 12, we see what was told unto Abram, whose name was later changed to Abraham, a father of many nations. Genesis 15 and 12 reads, And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, an horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. So now he's talking about ultimately Israel. Then it says, and also that nation, notice what it says here, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. So now he poured judgment upon Israel, upon Egypt through, or Kemet, through the plagues that were poured upon them. And then he said, they shall come out with great substance. They spoiled the Egyptians. I remember listening to years ago, John Henry Clark said, how did these people end up with all this gold? Where did the gold come from? Well, they spoiled the Egyptians. But nevertheless, it says, and thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. Verse 16, but in the fourth generation, they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Now, wait a minute. So you see here this notion or this idea of iniquity reaching its brim, so to speak. And it says again, but in the fourth generation, they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Now, why the Amorites? Because these are one of the peoples that inhabited that land, the promised land. You read in Deuteronomy the 7th chapter what he said to do when you go into that land. He says in verse 1, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and have cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites, and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. So now people say, well, how did the Lord allow this people to go in and they just took the land? That was judgment being poured out upon them. Okay, let's pick it up in Leviticus the 18th chapter. Leviticus the 18th chapter, and we'll pick it up at verse 24, because when he says when you go into this land, you have to be sanctified. That's one of our main problems right now. We live in a wicked nation right now. America's not a righteous nation. America's not a godly nation. Okay. Am I saying I want something to happen to America? No, I'm not saying that at all. I live here, family here, so I don't want to get misconstrued, but I understand wickedness. I understand that it is not a morally upright nation, even though it purports to be so. Even in many of those in power, many of the dominant culture, they have that mindset that they are righteous, but that's not the case. If you look at the standard of the word, in which many claim to believe in. So if that be the case, you should keep in mind that the Lord pours out judgment. And one thing his people should do is be sanctified. Instead of what we're trying to do, many of us is trying to be a part of what America is, and actually you should be sanctified, set apart according to the word. But verse 24 reads, defile not ye yourselves in any of these things. For all these, the nations are defiled, which I cast out before thee. So what's he talking about? If you read in Leviticus 18 earlier, he's talking about sexual morality. Okay, so he's saying like you need to not be engaged in these things, and he says because it's because of these things that he's going to kick him out. Now, what are some of these things? Well, he talks about I'll just read a couple of them here. He says in verse 22, which is a main one, he said, thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind, it is abomination. So you look at a nation that has legalized same-sex marriage, but he told you don't defile yourselves in the way in which these nations have defiled themselves, for in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you. I'm casting them out of that land. I'm punishing them. Don't do what they did. Okay, so now that's just one example. Again, another example. Moreover, verse 20, moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with thy neighbor's wife to defile thyself with her. That's abomination, right? Or that's adultery. Let's go to Genesis. Back to Genesis. And I want to pick it up in the 18th chapter of Genesis. Genesis, the 18th chapter. Notice what it says here in Genesis 18. The Lord is visited, Abraham is visited by the Lord, but then we see something here, and he, reassured of this son that Sarah's going to have. And it says something here. It says in verse 20, and the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know it. And the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. So now, when you keep reading about Sodom, the angels went to Sodom, and Lot entertained them, and the men of Sodom had become so wicked that they tried to lay with the men, who they thought were men. They were actually angels. And what was the judgment poured on Sodom because of its sin? In Genesis 19 and 24, it says, then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground. So now he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Even unto this day, Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed. So now that should put something on your mind, because why did he destroy? It was because of the iniquity of the place. It had gotten so bad that he destroyed it. And he's not a respecter of persons in this regard. Let's see, because when Israel became so wicked, he poured out judgment upon them. See, he's not a respecter of persons. Let's look at that. Let's pick it up at let's go to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles, the 36th chapter. Notice what it says here. Now, this is in the days of the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. It says in verse 14, 2 Chronicles 36 and 14, moreover, all the chief of the priests and the people transgressed very much after all the abominations of the heathen. Remember, before they went in the land, he said, don't do the things that they did. The land spewed them out. He said again, moreover, all the chief of the priests and the people transgressed very much after all the abominations of the heathen, and polluted the house of the Lord, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. Okay, so it was sacred. What did they do? They defiled it, the temple. And then it says in verse 15, and it got so bad in Israel. It's a side note. It got so bad in Israel that they had sodomites near the temple. You know what that was? They had homosexual temple prostitutes. That's how bad and morally defunct Israel had become. But it said, and the Lord God of their fathers sent to them by his messengers, rising up betimes and sinning, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. What did they do? Verse 16. But they mocked the messengers of God and despised his words and misused his prophets until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people. Notice what it says here, till there was no remedy. In other words, judgment had to be poured out. See, the judgment of the Lord shows that he is righteous. And it is the wicked that think they just going to be wicked and do whatever they want to do and not suffer any consequences forever. That is not the case. At a certain point, the cup of iniquity reaches its brim and judgment is poured out. Verse 17, therefore, what did he do? What was the judgment? Verse 17, therefore he brought upon them the king of the Chaldees, that's Nebuchadnezzar, who slew their young men with a sword in the house of their sanctuary and had no compassion upon young man or maiden, old man or him that stooped for age. He gave them all into his hand. That was judgment from the Lord because of sin. Let's go to Isaiah, the 24th chapter. So you see examples of this, but understand that's what's about to happen to this whole world when it's all said and done. Isaiah, the 24th chapter. He would allow nations, he would allow nations to reign and do what they do and show dominance. But at a certain point, again, the cup of iniquity reaches its brim, and that's going to be the case for the whole world. Isaiah, the 24th chapter and verse 1. This speaks, Isaiah the prophet prophesies of this judgment being poured upon the nations in the form of fire. Isaiah 24:1 reads, behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the taker of usury, so with the giver of usury to him. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for the Lord hath spoken this word. The earth mourneth and fadeth away, the world languisheth and fadeth away, the haughty people of the earth do languish. Now, what is the problem? Verse 5, the earth also is defiled. He's not talking about one nation. He said the earth also is defiled. He's not talking about one land. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Okay, so man is guilty. Then he said, therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen on this earth. Revelation, the 18th chapter. Notice what John prophesied prior to the coming of Mashiach. This is when he returns. Because this book is about the revealing of Christ. This is Revelation, the 18th chapter and verse 5. Well, actually, let's pick it up at verse 4, because it tells us, see, this whole, what was established in Babylon was this whole system of worship, and it is perpetuated even unto this day, and it's going to be destroyed. Notice what it says here in Revelation, the 18th chapter and verse 4. And I heard another, let's pick it up at verse 3. It says, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. It said, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Verse 3. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So it's talking about this system that was established. Then it says in verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. So you must be what? Sanctified. The same premise that we were shown when he told you don't do what these other nations have done. See, his people should be sanctified. And he tells you why. He said, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Now it's time for what? It's time for judgment. That's so. So let's pick it up at verse 6. It said, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works, and the cup which she hath filled, filled to her double. This is the last place here. This is Psalms, the 78th division. Psalm 78. So this is what the Lord will do, and everybody needs to take heed to that very fact, that he pours out judgment. And what you want to do is, quite frankly, get out of the way. You don't want to be partaker of that judgment. This is Psalms, the 78th division. 75, excuse me. And we'll pick it up at verse 7. It reads, but God is the judge. He put it down one and set it up another. That's how these nations, when they get so wicked, now the next thing you know, they moved off the scene, and another nation is the superpower, so to speak. What do you think is going to happen to America? You think America is going to be a superpower forever? That is not the case. It doesn't matter what it looks like now. That it's a reason why you don't see America in biblical prophecy. People think Babylon is talking about America. That's not Babylon. It's just not. Nevertheless, you don't see America specifically in biblical prophecy. So what does that tell you? That tells you, and what you do see is the reunification of the Roman Empire. You also see the powers of the East. That is not America. Nevertheless, he says, but God is the judge. He put it down one and set it up another. Verse 8, for in the hand of the Lord there is a what? He said, there is a cup, and the wine is red. It is full of mixture, and he poureth out of the same. But the dregs thereof, all the wicked of the earth shall wring them out and drink them. He has a cup of iniquity. And a cup, when it reaches brim, he pours out judgment. Because why? Because he is the judge over this whole earth. And that judgment will fall upon the wicked. And with that, brothers and sisters, it's always my prayer that you will edify.